Hiya, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
You wanna go do a podcast?
Sure.
Jump in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbies and Kens, Kellys of all ages, and everyone else, welcome to Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast. I'm your host, John, and with me I have my wonderful co-host. What is he? A little robot my parents made? Jay!
I'm not a robot.
Feisty little robot, aren't you? Anyway, for those of you joining us, we are a podcast about Barbie movies. Every week we watch one of the straight-to-DVD Barbie animated movies, and we rate its story, characters, animation, voice acting, and music to see how it stacks up. This week we'll be talking about the 15th animated Barbie movie, Barbie Presents Thumbelina.
Yeah, this was released on DVD March 17, 2009. It also had a limited theatrical run, just like we discussed with the Christmas Carol. It was released by Kid Toons Films in a few theaters across the U.S. And it was directed by Conrad Helton, who previously directed the Mariposa movie, and he'll actually be a name we'll be seeing quite frequently from here on out. Mm-hmm. And this movie was written by Elise Allen with music by Eric Colvin, so they're the Fairytopia team. And yeah, this is a fairy movie of sorts, though the Thumbelina isn't technically a fairy, but she's a tiny little person who has wings. Yeah, it's kind of based on the Hans Christian Andersen story of the same name. The original is about Thumbelina, who is trying to survive in the big world and dodging marriages to toads and moles.
As you do.
There is almost none of that in this movie. Or I should say, there is none of that in this movie. This is a very different, very, very loose adaptation.
Correct.
I don't think marriage is even mentioned.
No, this is more like all the environmental movies that we had in the 2000s.
Yeah, especially the late 2000s, there are a lot. This actually came out the same year as Avatar, and it's interesting how many sort of similarities there are. But this is sort of a trend at that time. We also have B-Movie was coming out at around that time, WALL-E, Ant Bully, Secret World of Arrietty, The Lorax, and then also some live-action movies like Evan Almighty and Arthur and the Invisibles. So these are all kind of these movies that are doing sort of this environmental theme.
Or feature short people.
Yeah, and even something like B-Movie has a lot of similarities to Thumbelina just by the fact that it is an environmentally minded movie about...
There's also the Smurfs that came out in 2011.
Oh, yeah.
It's not so much environmental, but there's a similar idea.
Yeah, the whole tiny people surviving in the big world. This one, there isn't a ton of, survival involved.
There was in the beginning, but then they figured it out.
Yeah, it's much more about sort of the environmental themes. And so the basic plot, this is once again we have a framing narrative, but this time rather than Kelly, we have a group of kids who Barbie is taking to plant some trees. And one of them, named Emma, picks out a small little tree with blue leaves. And the other kids are laughing at her like, oh, that tree's never going to amount to anything. So Barbie tells them this story about how even sort of the small things you underestimate can make a big change. And this is the story of Thumbelina, who lives with they're called twiller bees. So not quite fairies, but they do have this sort of magical power to make things grow. Mm-hmm. And they live a few miles outside of this big city. And one day people show up with plans to bulldoze the entire area and build a factory. Thumbelina and her friends hide in a flower patch, which just so happens to be chosen by McKenna, the daughter of the wealthy couple building the factory. And they end up in McKenna's bedroom. And McKenna obviously finds them, though they are able to escape. But Thumbelina decides to stay behind and convince McKenna to help them stop the construction project. And this is where we get into this sort of McKenna agrees to it, but she's not really all that committed to it. Meanwhile, the Twillerbees back at home are trying to sabotage this construction by sort of growing vines through the construction equipment and sabotaging everything. Thumbelina realizes that McKenna isn't really gonna fulfill her end of the deal, so she leaves, but McKenna at the same time realizes that her so-called friends aren't really being friendly, so she sort of tells them to leave and then rides on her bike to find Thumbelina, and the two hatch a scheme to convince McKenna's parents to stop the construction. It ends up that Thumbelina has to reveal herself to the parents, but the parents are like, okay, fine, we'll stop the construction, and McKenna rides her bike to stop it, and then the Twillerbees are so thankful that they let McKenna's parents and McKenna watch the birth of the Twiller babies.
Yeah.
This apparently super important ritual. That's kind of the... And then the parents decide to turn this area into a nature reserve, and...
Plot twist. Barbie knows Thumbelina, and that they're actually real.
Yeah. The camera sort of pulls back on this framing narrative and reveals that Thumbelina has been watching all along, and then Thumbelina helps this little small tree that Emma chose out grow, and that's kind of the end of things.
That's the biggest plot twist of this entire film. Which is the most shocking thing. It's like, what? I must know. How does she know the story? How did this happen? How do they meet? I need that film.
Because it is interesting, because a lot of the other movies, like the framing narrative, there will be implications that, like, in Christmas Carol, it's kind of implied that the Barbie character is descended from the Scrooge character.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, no, they're just directly like, oh yeah, there's Thumbelina chillin'. This entire story happened within the Barbie world, not just a story Barbie made up.
But just looking at this simplification of the story, it's not a bad story. It's just so commonly used. It has some good themes and good ideas. But again, it's so commonly used, and the execution of these ideas and themes aren't as strong or tightly put together than what was presented in this summary. Because in between is just a lot of unnecessary moments.
It goes exactly where you expect it to,
Yeah.
from the moment it starts. And again, you said there's a lot of ingredients here of a good story. I think for me the problem is I just didn't connect at all with the characters. I don't know, there's just something about them that I found them more obnoxious than charming, in a way that none of these other Barbie movies I've had that experience with.
Okay.
But yeah, the overall message here is really good. Even the small things you do can make a big difference. Because I think especially when we're talking about sort of environmental things, it's easy to feel sort of like, oh, nothing I do matters and everything's going bad anyway, so why should I do anything to help out? But no, it is important to do small things in your own life that then hopefully aggregate into bigger changes.
And again, like, there's like smaller themes as well, like McKenna learning to realize that her friends aren't really her friends because they're just competing for their stuff. There's more value in friendship. And also, as small, very small, that's not maybe done to the best degrees, like the parents, and how the parents need to take a step back and just take a look at things.
Yeah. The parents are the real villains here. They're both the ones who are building the factory, but then also they're not the greatest of parents to McKenna.
They're not, but you can tell that they love her in their own way.
They try to buy her love.
Right.
So it's the classic sort of neglectful rich parent thing that a lot of stories explore, which is this idea of like, well, the parents are kind of constantly busy, but they feel bad about that, so they buy the kid a ton of stuff. And we see McKenna's room has like so much stuff in it. There's toys, it's like a huge space, this flower bed that they brought in, and she even has like that one giraffe plushie that, like, anytime there's a rich kid in a movie or TV show, they have that giraffe plushie. But yeah, it's like they don't realize that that material stuff isn't a substitute for actual.
It's almost sad because they don't notice at all. And the only reason why they stop the construction is because they realize, holy crap, we're gonna kill an endangered species. That's not a good thing to do.
Yeah. But I do think it is like the thing that the movie leaves out is that the parents are probably just gonna go bulldoze a different field. Like, they've saved the Twiller bees and everything, but the core issue hasn't really been dealt with by the end of the story.
Yeah, like maybe it's implied that they just stopped their plans altogether and switched it to the nature reserve, but it could be presented better than that. Because what's the factory for? I don't know. Better money.
Yeah, honestly, I think part of the reason why it's just a generic factory is, I mean, this is a movie based on a toy line. And so they're very careful with their environmentalism stuff to be like, they never highlight even pollution as a thing, which is obviously like the creation of plastic and then plastic being thrown out and not properly disposed of. Those are huge deals with pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess that a certain portion of that pollution is, Barbie dolls.
Maybe.
But yeah, this movie doesn't want you to think about the idea that, oh, maybe Mattel and Barbie are contributing a bit to some of this sort of environmental decline.
It's more of like protect the trees. We don't want deforestation versus pollution.
Yeah. It's selective of how it is, of its themes. Like, they're being intentional in what they highlight here.
Right. And who knows, the parents might think before going to another field, because they might do research on the field to see what wildlife is there, which should be done before you do anything, really.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, thinking about this in context of these other environmentalist movies. One of the ones that actually I thought of a bit, and it's an older movie, the Studio Ghibli film directed by Isao Takahata, Pom Poko, which is about a group of tanuki, like Japanese raccoons, who they're living in this forest, and slowly the city is sort of being built up around them. And so they try and rebel against this urbanization in their own sort of like magical tanuki ways. So like they organize a bunch of spirits and have a spirit parade through the city to try and scare everyone. That doesn't work. And then they're like sabotaging construction equipment. So the whole part with the Twillerbees reminded me of Pom Poko. But what's interesting about Pom Poko that Thumbelina doesn't have is that Pom Poko doesn't have a happy ending because the story that they are telling doesn't have a happy ending. Urbanization doesn't just stop, it keeps going, and so it ends with these tanuki just living in smaller and smaller parks within the city. It's a sad ending, but it is also a kid's movie. So, I don't know. I feel like other movies have done what this movie is trying to do more complexly.
For sure. And plus, it's at this point in time, this is a story that's been done so many that there's not many options left to make it interesting. It really feels like this was a rushed film.
Yeah, I think even the animation quality, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, it's half and half for animation.
Yeah. It's a shame because I think this could have been a much better story.
Yeah, it probably was just some analytical person saw that this environment story was a trend, and they're like, you know what, we gotta do this. Let's hop on the bandwagon, and then they make their own film.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if that's kind of the motivation. Wall-E had come out the year before this, which that was a huge deal. And yeah, as we were saying, there's a lot of these movies coming out at this time. And there's even like a certain sort of prestige, sort of brand-wise, of being like, oh yeah, we made our environmental movie, our important movie.
Every brand has one of these episodes or films.
Yeah, the sort of like, this is our big message. They aren't being subtle about it because they want to make sure the kids understand it.
Sure.
But then they're maybe missing some of the nuance of the situation. And
yeah, so looking at the story, I gave it a 2.8, which is the same score I gave Diamond Castle.
Okay.
Diamond Castle, I think, just didn't have a strong story, where this one had a little structure of a story, but not great execution. So they balance each other out.
Yeah, I gave it a 2 out of 5. Again, I think if I were more invested in the characters, I think this story would have hit me more. Because it has all of those building blocks. It has character arcs, it has setup and payoff, it has sort of an interesting third act. But it just never came together for me. And then I think also this as a message movie, you have to evaluate how well it sort of pulls off the message it's trying to tell. And there are so many movies I would suggest above this as good movies about environmentalism.
Yeah. This would not be my first choice.
Well, while I appreciate what it's doing, I think it could have been better executed. Yeah. On to the characters. Again, I found them pretty uncompelling in a way that brings everyone...
They're the most basic characters you can have. They fill their role, and that's it.
Thumbelina, she's Tinkerbell, but with no flaws. And I mean Tinkerbell from the Tinkerbell movies, which were also coming out around this time, where in those movies it's sort of like Tinkerbell is a fairy with a good heart, but she's a bit of a klutz. That's what makes those movies interesting, is it's like, okay, how's Tinkerbell gonna mess things up, and then how is she gonna fix them? Whereas Thumbelina, she never messes up. She's just kind of like the perfect character who always does the right thing.
She's just there to be someone to aspire to, I guess. She's the toy, essentially. We want you to buy her toy, and we don't want our main toy to have flaws. That's kind of the way to look at this, really.
Yeah. And that has worked for some of these other Barbie movies where the plot is more interesting, or where we have more interesting side characters. And I do think we do have more interesting side characters here in Thumbelina. But yeah, Thumbelina herself is just kind of odd. I will say it is interesting, though, that she is our first protagonist in one of these Barbie movies that is not Barbie.
That's not specifically designed to be Barbie, yeah.
Yeah. And not played by Kelly Sheridan, and doesn't have the same model or anything. I think even the dolls are differently designed. So that's at least a little bit interesting, but I'm not going to give the characters too many extra points for that.
Yeah, I don't hate Thumbelina. She's just, again, she plays her role of being the one who moves the plot along and is the hero with little flaw.
Yep. Now, the character with more flaws is McKenna,
Mm-hmm.
who she's actually kind of interesting.
Kind of.
I like her arc. And I wish it were part of a better movie, because she starts out as this sort of spoiled rich kid, but we very quickly see that there's more going on there, that she wants to have this connection with her parents, but her parents are always busy, and she wants to have friends, but the friends she has are like just flat out mean, and their friendship is based entirely on this sort of one-upsmanship of like,
Possessions.
oh yeah, well you have this designer handbag, well I have this designer dress. And very materialistic.
Yeah, the type of thing that children would do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, this is where, as a Barbie movie, this kind of goes against the Barbie sort of brand image, is that, like, it's about how this sort of materialism is bad for friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mattel would probably love if the little girls buying Barbie dolls based on this movie were like, oh, well, I have the better one. I have the better dress. But no, the movie's just like, no, that's a bad thing. And that friendship isn't about material possessions. It's about this connection and this mutual respect and love. Well, maybe love's a strong word for what McKenna and Thumbelina have.
Island named after me.
And that's such an empty thing as well when you think about it. And again, I love McKenna's arc here because she does grow. And she does grow beyond these things. But, I mean, we've seen a better version of this same arc in Mariposa, where we had these spoiled rich characters who realize that they've been in the wrong and have to grow beyond it. And I don't know if their arc is better in that movie, but I do think Mariposa is a better movie overall. So the arc stands out a bit more than in here. Next up we have Thumbelina's two friends, Chrysella and Janessa.
Yes, the two pony characters, really.
Yeah, they're very like standard issue sidekicks.
Mm-hmm.
There's the shy, reserved one. Well, not really shy, but like there's the one who...
The cowardly one.
Yes, that's a good word. And then the brave, bold,
energetic, hyper one.
But also kind of a little like ditzy. That might be a bad word for it. But like, you know, not nearly the same level of intelligence as the rest of the characters.
Right.
And I mean, it's a classic sidekick dynamic because it's interesting to see how they connect and how they conflict throughout the movie. I don't know, it just doesn't amount to anything. I found it more annoying and distracting than interesting here. Yeah, you said it's similar to My Little Pony's characters.
Well, I say that because of the voice actors. They're the two big names in ponies doing similar voices that you'd see later on in ponies. So it's just those are my pony characters in this film.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I got from them. Mm-hmm. Having seen a single episode of My Little Pony, I could tell, like, okay, yeah, I don't know if these specific voice actors are in My Little Pony, though it sounds like they are, but they're definitely going for that manic energy. And
yeah,
I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of that manic energy in general, but here it just didn't ever amount to anything.
No, because they were just gone from the film for a bit, because they were off on their own side adventure that we didn't see a whole lot of. But
Yeah, and I do like this whole sabotaging the construction equipment thing.
That was fine. I was hoping that they bury the equipment.
Yeah, there were so many better ways to sabotage the equipment.
Having overgrown in the engines, that's great. Keep doing that, because that's actually quite effective than just taking off the wheels, because that takes less time to put back together. They have so much power and aren't really using that power quite as effectively. I get they're trying to show different ways to sabotage, but they should just keep the effective one.
Now, speaking of the construction, we have the various construction workers. First up is Myron, who's the supervisor. He's fun.
No, he's not.
I think partially because everyone around him is so bland.
He's the only character I didn't like in this film.
Oh, interesting. I had the opposite response, where he was the only character that I latched onto because he was the only character who felt like he had emotions about the things happening.
But he's just so over the top and unrealistic compared to all these fairy characters. Yes, I don't really care for him.
I agree that he's over the top. I just, for me, it wasn't an issue because the rest of the movie was so bland that anytime he was on screen, I knew it was going to at least have some energy to it.
Sure, but I don't like him. He's not a great design. He's just...
Yeah, his design is bad.
He's just not great. I'm gonna bulldoze this thing because I can.
I don't know. He worked for me because the rest of the movie around him was not working for me.
Sure.
Like, I was rooting for him a little bit.
Any of the
like,
construction people I want to see less of. Because I don't think they're that important. They bring the conflict at the end, but they're really not that important.
Yeah, I think they do something interesting with the construction workers where it's very clear that they're just there for the pay.
Mm.
Like, they aren't passionate about bulldozing this field, unlike Myron, who is very passionate about it.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh yeah, this is a job. We clock in, we do the work, we clock out. And that's interesting because that is often, you look at the workers who are quote unquote responsible for destroying the environment. And yeah, it's like people who are like, I need a job, I have a family to feed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm fine with those characters because I can believe those characters. They're there for a job. But Myron, I don't know why I don't think we needed to turn him into the antagonist. Just have him stay as the supervisor, being like, we have a job to do. Less of, we're gonna bulldoze this thing no matter what.
Yeah, I like that he goes so over the top.
I don't.
But yeah, it is a very odd thing with how they treat the rest of the workers.
Because I don't believe it, and it's just every third act has the same character with this type of story. And it's just to copy paste with little interest put into this character.
That was actually one of the connections I made between this and Avatar, which again came out the same year. Because that movie also has the Stephen Lang character, sort of this military guy who's now working as a mercenary here on Pandora. And initially he's just doing his job, but then when it comes to the third act, he's like, no, I just hate this entire planet and want it all dead, and I am making decisions based on that and not based on rationality. And yeah, I don't know, I found Myron interesting. The other construction workers, like, even though I sympathize with them, they take up way too much screen time.
They do.
And a lot of it is just like there's a scene of two of them smelling a flower.
It's the same scene each time with them.
Yeah.
They show up to do work. Oh, flowers are fighting back. Oh, guess we're not going to work today.
Yeah, I would say they were not the most compelling of characters, even though I don't know where I was going with that. Now, next up on the list, we have who I assume is your favorite character in the movie, Poofles.
Poofles serves the same as the cat from Christmas Carol, who's just there for comedic relief.
Which the cat for Christmas Carol had a cameo here.
Yeah, they did. They should really stop animating the animals as if they're people. Because the facial expressions don't work. It's like, why do we need this dog to look evil? I don't know. I like that Thumbelina starts using the dog as a mode of transportation.
Yep, that's a good touch.
But whenever the dog is in focus, it's just there for fun antics.
Yeah. I have one note on Poofles. Kill him with fire. Get him out of this movie. That's maybe a bit strong, but...
Yeah, I'd rather save that note for the cat, but...
Yeah. There's a scene where Poofles is chasing the fairies and jumping on a balcony, and I was like, you know what, if he fell off that balcony and was no longer in this movie, I wouldn't be too sad.
That's dangerous. Why are you letting your dog do that? That's so dangerous.
So, last up in terms of major characters, we have McKenna's parents.
Yeah, they're the true villains that need to have the most change.
Yeah. I really don't buy that at the end of the movie they're just gonna stop constructing factories and fields.
They might think twice about it, but, they're still business-minded as well.
Yeah. Hopefully they treat McKenna a bit better, but...
Hopefully. I think after the little garden scene, they might look more into McKenna.
Their arc could have been more interesting, but I think it's just kind of like tossed aside a bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, overall, again, I think the issues I have with the movie, so many of them stem from the fact that the characters are just kind of bland.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, I gave the characters a 1 out of 5.
Because of that, I gave it a 2.5. They at least serve their purpose, but there's nothing spectacular that makes them better.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, because one I think is a score for just very poorly developed characters that we've not quite reached.
Yeah, we'll see if I regret this score down the line. I stand by it now.
Sure.
In that I was just having such a terrible time watching the movie because I found the characters so completely bland.
On to animation.
This is somewhat of an improvement over Diamond Castle. Like, the character models are looking better.
Some of them are.
Yeah.
The main characters look fine. Everyone else, not so great. The construction workers, especially, not great.
Yeah. They've landed on a more stylized aesthetic. And, yeah, I think it, as you said, it works well for a lot of the main characters. I do think the Twillerby have weird faces.
Yeah, I think those faces work for a couple facial expressions. Like, when looking at the animation, there's a couple moments where I thought, oh, those were some good facial expressions. But those were like when they're deep in thought, or if they're looking at something seriously. I thought those faces worked. Any other expression was just a little lackluster.
Yeah,
we're not quite
I'd
there.
agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And the backgrounds here are really hit or miss.
They really are, yeah.
Like, I do like that there's lots of color here. There's lots of really good color. And I love the Twillerby tree with all of the houses. That was kind of a cool design. And McKenna's room is very, like, it's a location that they spend a lot of time in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is visually interesting with this sort of flower bed on one end, and then you have...
But then you go to the construction site, and it's just bland.
Yeah. Boring textures. It's flat. The surfaces don't feel like they have any sort of ups and downs to them. It's just like, oh, there's a kind of flat hill. And there's like a few trees spread out. And the trees look kind of bland. And yeah, the city as well, everything's very flat. And I don't know, there's something missing. That was also true of Diamond Castle. And I'm worried that we're getting to the point where they've just changed the animation style, and now this is just how it's going to be.
Until a new team comes in. Are they going to complete revamp?
Yeah, I'm curious to see for these next few Barbie movies. Because Christmas Carol, they went back more towards the old animation style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a director here who is newer to the series as well, so yeah. And then Poofles is real ugly.
Most animals
like
are.
Not in like, I don't know, he just has human teeth.
I know. He's just not great.
Yeah. He's Bibble in dog form, just design wise.
Sure.
And somewhat like plot relevance wise.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I think I actually might update my score here.
Yeah, I gave it a 3 because this is a completely different animation style. It works, but there's a lot of just very bland designs like that are just more bland than we've seen before, which is disappointing.
Yeah, I originally had a 3, but I'm actually bumping down my score to a 2.5.
Oh, well, I'm not that crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just something about it that, talking it through, I'm just like, oh yeah, I liked parts of it, but I don't know if I could give it more than 50% for what it is. We'll see down the road if I regret giving this movie such low scores, but I don't know. I think for now I can justify it.
On to voice acting, though. I think the voice acting is passable. It's fine. It does what it needs to do. There's not any performance that really stands out. They do their job, and that's that. That's how it is with a lot of these films, but this one specifically, no, there's not a lot of that stands out.
Yeah, for me, it did kind of stand out because of the Twillerbees. And it's, again, we talked about this sort of vocal quality that, you know, the characters in My Little Pony have. And it's very common for kids' animated stuff. This sort of very manic, almost like high-pitched voice, sort of over-exaggerating. It's also even like the way sometimes adults will talk to kids. Yeah, over-exaggerated and over-emphasizing things. And I don't know, I found it very difficult to watch. Yeah, I found a lot of and I'm not going to put that on the voice actors, because I think that's just the direction of where they wanted the voices to go. Whoever was in charge of directing that. But yeah, I was not particularly impressed with the voices here. I do think we have a lot of new voices this time around as well.
Yeah. Also, just thinking of the timeline here, this came out in 2009. the next year, that's when My Little Pony comes out. And so I'm wondering if, like, we'll see less and less of those voice actors because they'll be busy working on the show.
And I should say, like, the voices they're doing here, which are common for kids' animated cartoons, like, sometimes it bothers me and sometimes it doesn't. I think something about having the human characters makes it a little more egregious. But yeah, the one vocal performance that I did like was Louis Churillo as Myron.
I don't think so. No.
I don't know. He has an energy that he brings into it that makes it less bland whenever he's on screen.
I mean, I'm not annoyed by any of the voices, except for Myron's.
Yeah, I guess two very different experiences with this.
I'm
movie.
wondering if it's just like I have more experience hearing these type of voices from years of watching ponies.
Yeah, that would be my sort of speculation, is that maybe I just haven't seen enough of...
Right, like once you get used to it, it's not all that bad.
I still gave it a 2.5 out of 5 for voice acting.
Well, I gave it a 3 because I'm more generous than you.
But yeah, finally we have the music, which, again, I found it pretty bland.
I mean, it is basic, it is bland. It does its job of giving you stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't have the heights of the Mariposa score. It's more of this sort of generic animated movie or TV show score. Yeah, I was not particularly impressed. I think I am gonna bump up my score half a point because I think I was being too...
Right, because I don't see... Yeah, because I don't see what the score that you had before is... I don't know if I agree with that one. Because, like, for a score to be like that, I'd have to be really offended by the music.
Yeah, I'm gonna bump my score up half a point. Give it a 2.5 for music.
It balances out the animation, so you're back to where you were.
I just did not enjoy this movie.
I thought it was fine. This was easier to sit through than Diamond Castle for me.
Okay, I had the opposite experience.
I don't know. This is one of the few points where we have our opposites here. Only took like 15 films.
Yeah, where you enjoyed this much more than I did, which is not usually the case.
Enjoy is a strong word. Let's say
Well, you tolerated it more than I did.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this is, and I should be open about this, this is one of the movies that I saw quite a few times as, like, growing up, because this was, and she's been on the podcast before and said this was my sister Sarah's one of her favorite of these Barbie movies. So I think part of it is just that, like, my memories of this movie are like, oh, do we have to watch this one again?
Right, you have a bias towards this one specifically.
Yeah. I'm still going to stand by my score here, though.
Quality-wise, it's not great. Yeah, music, I gave a 3, you gave it a 2.5.
Yeah. Overall, I gave it a 10.5 out of 25, which is my lowest score of anything yet. That's a 42% or a 2.1 on our 5-point scale.
Yeah, I gave it a 4.3, which is 57%, and 2.8. This is my second lowest, with the lowest still being Barbie Diaries, but I think that I would enjoy Barbie Diaries more than this.
Yeah, I would honestly, even though the animation is bad, I would rewatch Barbie Diaries sooner than I'd rewatch this one.
Yeah, because like one of the biggest flaws that we had with Barbie Diaries was that it was a copy of Mean Girls. Yeah. And of course, all the flaws of its story, having too many things. This one just had a lack of things, but at least it told its story.
Yeah. it's interesting to compare and contrast this with Barbie Diaries. But yeah, I was just overall let down by this movie, and I'm hoping that the next movie will be a little bit more interesting.
Given what that film is, yeah. Overall, I watched it. I didn't have any positive or overwhelmingly negative thoughts. There you go.
I do have to say, it's pretty bad that James Cameron watched Thumbelina, and he's, cramming for his Avatar release date, and he goes, oh, maybe I can just, snatch a few elements from there. That should be fine.
In 6 months,
obviously. Yes,
I'll have
yes,
much
obviously.
better animation than this film.
Much better animation, a much better story, much better characters.
That will hold up 10 years from now.
Yeah. Versus, cinematic masterpiece, Barbie presents Thumbelina.
Yeah, very cinematic. Very masterpiece.
Yes, it was released in theaters, so it is technically cinematic.
Technically it is. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media. We're Binging Barbie Podcast on Instagram, at Binging Barbie on Twitter, and Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast on Letterboxd, where you can find an up-to-date list of our Barbie movie rankings. Join us next week for our discussion of Barbie and the Three Musketeers. Yo-ho.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
I'm intrigued how they're gonna do this.
Yeah, it should be interesting. We have a couple of guests who will hopefully be joining us that I think we'll have a good conversation, if nothing else.
We'll see. Anyway, thank you guys, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.